Coming into 2020, Cartoon Network was already in a challenging spot as a channel, struggling creatively while they attempt to save face and paint themselves as something other than the channel that keeps making divisive reboots. However, Cartoon Network in 2020 seemed to serve as proof that new old habits die hard, and with the continuation of current business as usual and even steps backward in certain aspects, CN appeared to make little effort at self-preservation and thus kept sinking further underwater. When I took stock of the state of Cartoon Network last at the end of 2019, I had reason to criticize them for offering mediocre fare that was technically competent, but either executionally lackluster or creatively inconsistent, at best. I reminded them of their corporate owner's marketing slogan that just okay is not okay, but I had no reason to believe that the situation at Cartoon Network could get any worse. Like with so many things in 2020, we learned not to say things like that. But I'm not even talking about the pandemic that would bring the world to a screeching halt. Cartoon Network would serve us that lesson in their own way, a full 2 months before quarantine hit our shores. ThunderCats Roar was among the first new kids TV series of the year, and it immediately proved itself to be the worst. It's ironic, honestly. Many of CN's other series take an eternity to become more than underwhelming premises, but this show wasted no time in displaying just how awful it was. Within 60 seconds flat, the already much despised third rehash of the 1980s franchise proved everything its critics said about it right in almost meticulously destructive fashion. The crash-landed alien warrior cats were reduced to nothing more than indistinctive, annoying conduits for incompetent adventures in attempted heroics and occasionally decent animation. The show's polarizing art style, nearly non-existent humor, and its eventual crossover with the similarly despised Teen Titans Go, which proved just as bitter and indignant as it sounds on paper, didn't help its case much. But boy, it sure was a field day for online content creators! Personal benefit aside though, it was a disgrace to storytelling and the technical competency we apparently can no longer take for granted on television, and for likely the first time ever, I was actively annoyed by the continued presence of a character on my screen. There are few things I truly harbor hatred for, and in January, this became one of them. Cartoon Network rode this show out all the way through the spring, then brought the show back in November for strip premiere burn-offs at the despicable time of 8 o'clock in the morning. Usually I would be angered by that sort of scheduling, but in this case I find it deserved. The show was announced cancelled on November 20th, 2020, and its final episode aired on December 5th, making this garbage reboot one more thing we can leave in 2020. It will not be missed. One thing that will be missed, however, is the immensely influential Steven Universe, which, upon the conclusion of its epilogue series, Steven Universe Future in March 2020, was already long a relic of a time when Cartoon Network series were actually knowable. Plenty of other people have spoken about the impact of this series in ways I am fully unable to verbalize here, as one who has never had much interest in seeing the series. As the entire cartoon space on the internet was crying over the Future finale, I was watching The Crystal Maze US, which was new on Nick at the same exact time, so I won't spend much time dwelling on it here. One of its less stellar legacies, though, is the fact that the show and the popularity of its Steven bombs birthed the modern and now nigh inescapable practice of week-long strip premieres, which have gone on to do horrible things to scheduling across kids' TV. So I guess there's at least one legitimate reason as to how Steven Universe is garbage, and here's why. Even amongst the relatively quiet existences most Cartoon Network shows have, the series We Bare Bears had a particularly quiet life on air. The slice-of-life comedy about 3 varieties of bears trying to be human has never really been high on the list of series Cartoon Network fans extol from the channel, almost always being crowded out by other shows, be it Steven Universe or OKKO or Infinity Train. CN critics have also had their hands fairly full through Gumball's abrupt finale or the continued insolence of Teen Titans Go. Wild popularity in Asia helped keep the show afloat through the back of its 4-season run, to the point that the show's final episode in May 2019 was an entire plot featuring K-pop group Monsta X. What fans the show had left were treated to a proper resolution, however, through the premiere of We Bare Bears the movie in the summer of 2020, which let the stack pack go out on a high. And they did in front of 458,000 viewers, which is particularly high indeed for Cartoon Network these days. On that relative strength, though calling that number strength still feels like a stretch to me even given how far CN has fallen in audience, Cartoon Network decided to give the show a spin-off series dubbed We Baby Bears, which will bow in 2021. As the title gives away, it's the bears, but as cubs. Man, Cartoon Network really wants to have babies on TV, like a 30-something woman about to start a midlife crisis. And speaking of Cartoon Network making baby shows, the summer of 2020 saw 2 new cartoons divert onto Warner Media's nascent streaming service HBO Max, and they came off as particularly infantile indeed. Tig N Seek and the Fungies, about a curiously investigative 8-year-old and a curiously adventurous fungus, respectively, would prove not only bare bones as concepts, but also more quietly, insidiously destructive as to what the bar for a coherent show for the 6 to 11 demographic is. Cartoon Network has been toying with the lowest common creative denominator for a little while now. Apple and Onion comes immediately to mind, but 2020 seemed to be the year where the subtext became text, and those subtly laid plans came home to roost. Tig N Seek proved a boring watch while destroying character dynamics in the background, while the Fungies was slightly more creative but seemed to suggest applause for doing the bare minimum effort with regards to executional coherency. There's nothing terribly interesting or memorable about either series, and so it's apparently also skipped a few of the steps in the lifespan of a streaming series and headed straight into long-term irrelevancy. I did make reviews of both series when they came out, however. If you're looking for more context than this, I'll have them linked in the description. Of far more interest in the kids' TV space was Infinity Train Book 3, which arrived in August 2020 as the first installment of the acclaimed animated anthology to premiere exclusively on HBO Max. For once, Cartoon Network rightly deserved praise for something, as the new set of 10 episodes explored a new set of train riders and a new round of weighty concepts, right up to a gripping conclusion that I won't spoil here. The series pushed the caliber of storytelling and subject matter in animation forward, ironic for a network otherwise intent on sending it hurling backward, and will certainly go down as one of the more memorable series of the 2020s, assuming the crippling irrelevancy of half its lifespan being on a streaming service doesn't get to it first. A 4th book, after much feverish and crazed fervor by even some of the more rational parts of the cartoon space, is on its way. As much as Cartoon Network has picked up some new bad habits in recent years, 2020 saw the continuation of a particularly old bad habit as well. Bakugan Battle Planet continued to have the dishonor of airing on Sunday mornings at 7 AM to finish out its first season in the winter of 2020, and then when the show's second season, retitled Bakugan Armored Alliance, kicked off in April, the show was given a promotion, in reverse, to the even more unceremonious and disgusting time slot of Sunday mornings at 6:30 AM. As I've said before, Sundays are where kids' TV goes to die, and Sunday mornings doubly so. Ratings have thus struggled mightily as expected, with viewership mostly languishing in the 100,000s range, and only a few episodes all year netting higher than 250,000 viewers. Ratings even dipped into the 5 figures for a few weeks in November 2020, bottoming out at 75,000 on November 8th. Honestly, why does Cartoon Network even have the rights to this show if they're going to treat it in this way and premiere it in a scheduling no man's land? Though morning burn-offs were arguably the least of Cartoon Network's scheduling problems, the channel continued to suffer from a general lack of scheduling variety in 2020, with most days filled to the brim with endless runs of Teen Titans Go and The Amazing World of Gumball, as in previous recent years. Outside of rotating premieres, occasional helpings of Craig of the Creek and Total Drama Rama were apparently enough to keep most of the complaints at bay, but didn't do much overall. There will be a massive shakeup as to how Cartoon Network operates in this regard in 2021, but with regards to stuff like this, it likely won't be any better. That shakeup already began to be set into motion with the announcement of Cartoon Network's re-entry into the preschool programming market for the first time in 15 years in the fall of 2020. With the announcement of Batwheels, featuring sentient superpowered vehicles set in Gotham City, Cartoon Network took on a risky bet, taking a dive into preschool programming in what may be their last roll of the dice before the channel's ratings average gets too low for new content to even be viable. I discussed this in detail back when it was announced, but Cartoon Network will have to manage this just right in order for everything to not blow up in their faces and have their preschool attempts fail again. The stakes are much higher this time than in 2005, as a failure here might just take the entire channel down with it. There are plenty of new details to be discussed, however, that offer added clarity as to what CN's strategy is here, and that'll be in a future video. Make sure you hit subscribe now so you don't miss it. Sadly, we can't talk about 2020 without mentioning the global pandemic, and while Cartoon Network's series weren't impacted in any on-screen ways, though the crews would have to adjust to working from home, the channel didn't seem to put much effort into a response to help young viewers navigate the new, uncertain world around them. The channel put out a few basic PSAs on hygiene and hand washing, and that was largely it with regards to its reaction to the pandemic. It's acceptable, but it's a bit basic, particularly given the variety of challenges likely being faced by Cartoon Network's audience, and honestly everyone else, during the pandemic, and in its earlier days especially. More notable was how the channel responded to the reckoning for racial justice that dominated the world over the summer. Unfortunately, it was notable for all the wrong reasons.
Ha! You can't get married. Why not? Black people can't marry white people.
Now, to be fair, it's not the worst thing in the world, but when your example of a racist kid becomes a meme in itself, I think you've screwed up at your job. Even beyond that, the PSA is cheesier than a stuffed crust pizza, even when they're not intending it to be, and the execution is somewhat shoddy. It's important to bring up and confront the challenges of racism, and it's good that Cartoon Network is doing this. But on a matter this important, it's better if you don't screw it up. While I've given out plenty of leeway to most networks on how to handle the impact of this latest reckoning on race, I'd argue that the first PSA in this continuing set is misguided at best, and could have approached the topic more naturally instead of in this staged, forced way. It could be argued that you have to beat kids over the head with this sort of thing more than you would with older audiences, but I think a better balance between that and delivering the message without a hitch could have been achieved here. Cartoon Network's handling of this PSA isn't a ruinous misstep for the wider campaign, but it's bad optics and bad delivery in a place where they're needed the absolute least, and getting this message caught up in a hurl like this hurts the cause that they're trying to emphasize. Heading into 2021 and beyond, Cartoon Network faces an uncertain future. They haven't really changed much with regards to their content or scheduling, and thus their backslide to obscurity continued unabated and was even accelerated in some ways. CN seems to have a cluelessness about this, given how business as usual went on at the channel in 2020, but at the same time it's hard to make that argument with regards to their new series, which seem to suggest that if they're on their way out, they might as well burn down all the standards of kids' TV animation with them. Hopefully obsolescence doesn't come for them, but if they want to avoid it, they need to pretty much do a complete 180 from the way they're doing things right now. And it's an open question whether Cartoon Network has the willpower and the motivation to get there. But if how they handled 2020 serves as a sign, they don't seem all that interested in saving themselves. Remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the Year in Review series, plus more great explorations of the world of television every single week. You can check out how Cartoon Network's 2019 went, along with in-depth looks at some of the things I've mentioned in this video, up here or down in the description. I'm Benzie Johnson Jr., I'm enthusiastic about television, and I'll see you next time.